Mr. Pretorius. Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry we are starting 5 minutes late. I had a meeting. Are you ready?
Yes, we are, Chair. From today and for the next few days and into next week, we will be dealing once again with the tranche of witnesses dealing with matters related to what has become known as BOSASA. Today, the evidence will be led of Mr. Peet Venter, whose affidavit or first affidavit was annexed to the statement of Mr. Agrizzi. Mr. Venter has come forward and will be led by Ms. Molefe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Molefe.
Thank you, Chair. Before we start, there are just some few preliminary matters that I would like to bring to the Chair's attention. Firstly, as referred to by my leader, Mr. Pretorius, this evidence relates to the first statement that was annexed to Mr. Angelo Agrizzi's statement, which he referred to as S8 and which appeared at pages 929 to 1241 of his statement. The statement was presented by Mr. Agrizzi as having been prepared and signed by Mr. Venter. Chair, in this respect, Mr. Venter will, in his opening, deal with the circumstances that led to the drafting and signing of the first statement referred to in Mr. Agrizzi's testimony. He will also deal with his interaction with Mr. Agrizzi and Mr. Gavin Watson. Now, from these interactions, Chair, the legal team brings to your attention the possible questions that may arise in that respect, and we wish to repeat our submissions that were made during the opening of BOSASA-related evidence with regard to Mr. Venter, that the evidence could, in theory at least, be entirely fabricated, it could be exaggerated or extorted, and that it could be motivated by improper motives, or in Mr. Venter's case, influence. We do emphasize once more, Chair, that we make no prior submissions on the cogency or reliability of the evidence. We also make no prior submissions on whether it is comprehensive or not, and whether it is all the evidence. We will talk about this in detail later. Chair, we also deem it prudent to supplement the bundle that is before you with the first statement that was submitted by Mr. Agrizzi, which was said to have been prepared by Mr. Venter. Although the statement is prepared separately in a bundle, which I will beg leave to hand up, this is done merely for the sake of ease of reference, as during testimony we will have to refer to both statements. And we propose, Chair, that this evidence that was previously submitted be, for the purpose of today's evidence, be marked as PV82. We also include Mr. Andries van Donner's statement as PV81, and this is for the same purpose. Chair, the approach that has been adopted to deal with today's evidence
Ms. Molefe,
yes, Chair.
PV81 and PV82, are those the ones that you say you put up only for convenience, because it will be necessary to refer to them, but otherwise they are already part of what is before the Commission?
Certainly, Chair. These are the annexures that were provided to the Chair this morning as PV81 and PV82.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is whether we already have these from previous witnesses already or not.
We do, Chair. PV81 is the statement that was submitted by Mr. Andries van Donner.
Yes.
PV82 is the first statement that was said to have been prepared by Mr. Venter, and this was submitted by Mr. Agrizzi as S8 in his evidence.
Yes, but in his evidence, was it marked PV82 or was it marked something else?
In Mr. Agrizzi's evidence, Chair, it was marked as S8. However, we have decided to include it again in this bundle purely for the sake of ease of reference, as we are going to refer to it when we deal with Mr. Venter's evidence.
But the problem is that it might cause confusion, might not, if the same document ultimately appears in the record under different exhibit numbers. If when it was submitted by Mr. Agrizzi, it was marked A, and then it is submitted now again, but now it is marked B. When we have the complete record, there could be confusion as to how it should be referred to. Why don't we just use what we already have, because it's already before us, then we refer to it in the same way we referred to it then when Mr. Agrizzi gave evidence.
Certainly, Chair, as it pleases the Chair. The Chair will also note that...
Because then in that way, it's the same document, but it is referred to in the same way as it was referred to earlier.
Indeed, so Chair, as the Chair might have noted, Mr. Agrizzi's pagination reference still appears on what we had called PV82.
Yes.
We shall refer to it as S8, and the numbering that will be referred to will be as originally appears in Mr. Agrizzi's S8.
Yes.
As it pleases you, Chair.
Okay, because I think then any reference to PV82, we shouldn't make that reference because it could cause confusion, isn't it? We just refer to it as it was referred to during Mr. Agrizzi's evidence.
Certainly.
Is that all right?
That's fine. Thank you, Chair, as it pleases you.
Would the same concern not arise in regard to PV81?
Chair, the concern is similarly resolved in that Mr. Andries's pagination appears on the document, and it will also be referred to as such.
Yes. So later, the page or the marking that has PV82 and PV81 could be removed so that there is no confusion. Is that all right?
Certainly, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, as it pleases you, Chair. Chair, in addition to the matters...
So just to summarize then, the document which is marked, or the annexure which is marked PV82 will from now on be referred to as?
It will be referred to as S8.
F8.
S8.
S for sugar.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I think I'll just change this here and write S8, and maybe somebody should do the same with the witnesses annexure. And then shall we do the same in regard to the other one? And would
Thank
it
you,
be
Chair.
S1 or what will
No,
it be?
it was marked as T1.
T1. So I've crossed out PV82 in the other one, and I'm crossing out PV81 in this one, and I'm replacing that with T1.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to those issues, Chair, Mr. Venter will also...
Let's just make sure that they've got it right first.
As it pleases you, Chair.
You may be needing other assistance on your left.
Thank you, Chair. I have also noted the corrections of the bundle reference on my notes.
Yes, no, what I'm saying is you may be needing another colleague to be around there in case something needs to be done to assist the witness. I'm not sure, so at least Mr. Pretorius is here. He hears what I'm saying.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, all right. Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. As in addition to the issues relating to the drafting of the first statement, Mr. Venter will also give evidence on the change of the main business of BOSASA subsidiaries and the purpose that this sought to achieve. He will also be dealing with his interaction with government officials. He will lastly also be dealing with the cash payments made to several persons on instruction. Chair, I kindly request that the witness be sworn in.
Okay. Please administer the oath or affirmation, registrar.
Please state your full names for the record.
Peet Venter.
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you. You may proceed, Ms.
Thank you,
Mlafa.
Chair. Mr. Venter, please refer to the bundle, or exhibit rather, that is marked T10 before you. Can you look at page 1 of that bundle?
Okay, I think is T10 one that we already have received into, or is it new?
This is new, Chair.
Okay. The file that has a statement by Mr. Petrus Stephanus Venter, signed on the 19th of March 2019, is to be marked as Exhibit T10.
Indeed so, Chair.
The other file that is marked S8, the liver arch file, that is already in.
Indeed so, Chair.
Okay, all right, thank you. So now when we say Exhibit T10, we know which one we're talking about.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Venter, please refer to pages 1 to 24. Is that your statement to the Commission? Please turn to page 23 of the
please
bundle.
put on your mic. Thank you.
Thank you.
But let me just repeat the first question. On page 1 to 24, is that your statement to the Commission?
Yes, Chair.
Can you turn to page 23? Is that your signature appearing on that page?
That's my signature, Chair.
And staying on page 23, what is the date that is stated there?
19th day of March 2019.
Is that the date on which you signed the statement?
Correct.
Now, do you understand that the contents of and incidents that are referred to in this affidavit may incriminate you in potentially serious offenses?
Yes.
Are there any corrections that you wish to make on your statement?
Yes. I would like to just to refer to 3 corrections, please, Chair. The first correction, page 7, paragraph 15. In the middle of the page, I referred to my knowledge, all the family members of the Gavin Watson family who are on the Concilium payroll. I just want to do a correction there, Chair.
Is it paragraph 15 or page 15?
Page 7, paragraph 15.
Okay, in the middle of paragraph 15.
Yes.
Okay.
Where it says, to my knowledge, all the family members of Mr. Gavin Watson.
Yes.
I just want to make a correction with, to my knowledge. I just want to change it to, I was told that all the family members of Gavin Watson. I just want to change.
So you would like us to
just to amend it
to delete to my knowledge and say I was told that.
Yes, Chief.
Thank you. Are there any other further corrections you wish to make?
Yes, page 14, paragraph 30 at the top.
What paragraph again?
Paragraph 30, Chair.
Yes.
I just want to change where I said reference to each paragraph which are actually factually incorrect. Just want to change it to some of which are factually incorrect. Some of which are factually incorrect, yeah.
Between the words paragraph and which you
Yeah.
want us to insert some of.
Change which to some. With reference to each paragraph, yeah, I suppose we can
Yeah,
leave
it
in
should be
which.
some of which,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
Chair.
okay.
And are there any other further
And
corrections?
just lastly, on page 16, paragraph 35, I've had in there Morocco and Morocco.
That
It
on
might
my
be
bundle appears, sorry, Mr. Venter, at 35.5.
Yes, that's correct. 35.5, page 16.
Yes.
I just want to refer to where it says Morocco and Morocco. I just want to stick with Morocco, just not to confuse the Chair.
Oh, so we must delete Morocco and the
Morocco.
and the hash
Morocco should remain.
with an O or
With an O.
with an
O
O.
should remain, Chair.
So we must delete the hash
Morocco.
and Morocco.
With an A, yes.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you now confirm the correctness of your statement?
Yes.
Please turn with me back to page 1 of the bundle. In paragraph 4 of your statement, you deal with the circumstances under which you drafted a certain statement. Can you take the chair through that paragraph, please?
Can I read it? Or can I just explain it, Chair?
You can just speak, and
I
if
just-
you want to refresh your memory, you can have a look at it. But if you can just speak about the incident or how it happened, feel free to do that.
Chair, I just want to elaborate as to under what circumstances I've signed the first affidavit and
Yes.
what led to all of that. But it would actually come out in this affidavit as we continue.
Yes. Okay. Well, Ms. Millefe, well, do you want him to read it and take it from there, or what would you like?
Well, Chair, I'm in your hands.
I
What
hear
Mr.
he
Venter-
says it will come out
It
later.
will be dealt with later. However,
Yes.
he introduces the history of the
Yes,
first statement in this
that's very
paragraph.
important, yeah.
And I would prefer that he rather, if the chair permits, that
Yeah.
he read it,
Yeah,
and we
okay.
will deal with it in detail
That's
later.
fine.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chair.
You may read it.
Read it. I've previously signed an affidavit in respect of the aspects that will be covered within this current affidavit. I did not prepare the affidavit, hereinafter referred to as the first affidavit, freely and voluntarily, as I signed the affidavit under duress, as will be detailed below. I also submit that although various portions of my first affidavit were edited or added to by Mr. Agrizzi, the majority of the occurrences and detail described is factually correct. I will comment on the aspects in my first affidavit which are factually incorrect later in this affidavit. And then, Chair, I've inserted this paragraph 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3 just to
Yes.
state which paragraphs are correct,
Yes.
altered, and so on.
Yes. You
And
can
we will
read
come
on if you want to place that on record.
Okay.
Yes, you may
Yes,
read
You
the
can
paragraphs
read
if you
those
wish.
4.1, 4.2, 4.3.
Okay,
Yeah.
paragraph, I will comment on the aspects in my first affidavit which are factually incorrect later in this affidavit. I can confirm that 4.1, The paragraphs wherein certain information was added by Mr. Agrizzi into my first affidavit is in respect of paragraphs 9, 17, 21 to 25, 26, 27, 28, 31, and then 32 and 33. 4.2, the contents of the information contained within paragraphs 1 to 4, 8, 10, 13, 16, 18, 19, 20, and 35 of my first affidavit is correct. 4.3, the contents of the information contained within paragraphs 5, 7, 11, 12, 14, 15, 29, 30, and 34 of my first affidavit is correct. However, I've included information and detail in this affidavit in order to clarify certain aspects.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. These paragraphs that are referred to in the first statement will be dealt with in due course.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Venter, having stated this, is the evidence that you're about to give and that which is contained in your statement being given without any promise of a reward or incentive?
Nothing.
And is the same evidence being given freely and voluntarily?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Mr. Venter, what qualifications do you hold?
Chair, I've got a National Higher Diploma in Cost and Management Accounting, National Higher Diploma in Taxation, and a Postgraduate Diploma in Financial Planning.
Are these all the qualifications you hold?
Yes.
And what do you currently do for a living?
I'm a tax consultant, Chair.
Before your current employment, where were you first employed?
I was first employed after my studies. I started working at the South African Revenue Services for approximately 13 years, which after that I left SARS, and then I joined an acquaintance of mine who had an auditing practice firm in Krugersdorp, and I started working there.
And in what capacity were you employed at SARS?
As an auditor.
You say you were employed with SARS for a period of about 13 years.
For about 13 years, from 1991 to approximately 2004.
So you left the employ of SARS in the year 2004.
2004, approximately.
And what was your reason for leaving SARS?
SARS implemented a project called SIACA project, where all the auditors had to be relocated to some central point, which was Megawatt Park. And at the time, I had an opportunity to become a tax consultant at this auditing firm. So I decided to leave the employment of the South African Revenue Services.
And following your employment with SARS, were you employed anywhere else?
No, I was employed with at this firm, which changed names over time, and I remained there until the end of August 2018.
And in what capacity were you employed?
Also a tax consultant.
During which periods?
From the date I left SARS, which was 2004, up until 2018, which is almost like 14 years, Chair.
And during your employment with this firm, were you introduced to BOSASA?
Yes, I was introduced to BOSASA.
When?
Chair, just to give you a little bit of background, during my last year at the South African Revenue Services, a colleague of mine was busy conducting an audit at BOSASA, and I assisted him. He pulled in my services to assist him with the audit. So that's where I actually, where I became aware of BOSASA and the people of BOSASA.
What was the name of the firm that employed you after?
I was employed at a firm called Best of Leon Incorporated.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, and now you say that you were introduced to BOSASA during your last year with SARS.
Yes.
What was the nature of your involvement with BOSASA?
I assisted the colleague who was conducting an audit at BOSASA.
So he was auditing BOSASA on behalf of SARS?
On behalf of SARS, and he pulled me in. He assisted some resources, so myself and various other colleagues were pulled in to assist him in conducting the audit.
And what role did you play in assisting? Because you earlier said that you were employed with SARS as an auditor. With Bester Viljoen, what was your role?
At Bester Viljoen, I was a tax consultant, rendering consulting services with regards to all taxes.
So when you were assisting with the audit of BOSASA, were you assisting as a tax consultant?
No, I was employed at also at the South African Revenue Services. I assisted a colleague who conducted a SARS audit at the time. And shortly thereafter, I resigned, and then I joined the firm, the Bester Viljoen Incorporated, who was then, Chair, who was then later, a couple of months or a year later, appointed as the external auditors of BOSASA.
Yes.
Does that explain maybe the confusion?
Yes, it does, thank you. And what were the functions of Bester Viljoen as external auditors, rather, of BOSASA?
They were conducting the external audit. We were performing the tax consulting services and company secretarial services, Chair.
Yes. And can you just confirm from what year Bester Viljoen started performing the audit function, rather, in relation to BOSASA?
If I remember correctly, Chair, I think it started in 2006.
You said that a few months after you had joined that firm, they were appointed as external auditors for BOSASA. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Yes. Did you have any hand in that firm getting BOSASA work? Or being so appointed?
Chair, I believe that my experience at the South African Revenue Services was important to the BOSASA group. They found out that I've left the South African Revenue Services, and as a result, they approached our firm to take over the audit and tax consulting services.
Yes. No, it's just interesting that in the last year, your last year of employment at SARS, you get pulled in by a colleague to be involved in auditing BOSASA, and you resign. Immediately after that, you get employed in a certain firm. Within a few months, they get BOSASA work. That's why I'm asking whether you may have had a hand in getting that firm being appointed as external auditors for BOSASA.
Chair, I can confirm that my role in the Bester Viljoen Incorporated firm was to do a bit of marketing due to my previous employment at SARS.
Yes.
And as a result of that,
Yes.
I approached various clients, but
Yes.
BOSASA also became aware of the fact that I was not employed at SARS anymore, and
Yes.
luckily for us, they accepted
Yes.
the appointment at the time. Yes,
Yes.
it was a good audit. The
Yes.
fees were good.
Yes. Well, I guess that your background, having been involved at SARS, may have been something that clients would have considered
Correct.
an additional advantage for the firm that you had joined.
Yes, Chair, because of the knowledge that I've gained
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
South African Revenue Services.
Okay, thank
Correct.
you.
Thank you, Chair. Now, in your last year of employment with SARS, do you recall if there were any audit queries that were raised by SARS in relation to BOSASA?
No, it was just an audit, and I can't remember which company. I think it was the main company, BOSASA Operations, that was audited. So it was just a normal audit that was conducted by my colleague previously working at SARS.
When I earlier asked you from when Bester Viljoen started performing audit functions for BOSASA, you said early in 2006. However, in paragraph 8.5 of your statement, you state there from around early 2005 onwards. So which of the 2 years is it?
Just maybe, Chair, just to explain that, I think the first year that we conducted the audit was 2006. So we might have been appointed during 2005, but the audit was for the 26 financial year.
Okay.
Yes, and did the auditing firm Bester Viljoen still go by that name moving forward from the year 2006 and onwards?
No, Chair, the name changed. Partners would come and go, would resign, and new partners will come on board. And as a result of that, the name would change as new partners will come on board.
Okay, and what is the firm known as today?
It changed from Bester Viljoen Incorporated, it changed to Maseng Viljoen Incorporated, and then it changed to Darcy Herman Incorporated.
Yes, you mentioned 3 services that were provided by Bester Viljoen, which is now Darcy Herman, as you say. And you said it was auditing, secretarial services, and tax-related services. Now, of these 3 roles, in which role were you involved?
I was in the tax side, tax consulting, Chief.
In performing the mentioned tasks, who within BOSASA did Darcy Herman deal with for the purposes of providing these services?
The point of entry was the former CFO, Mr. Andries van Tonder.
And were there any internal auditors employed within BOSASA?
Chair, as far as I know, no, there weren't any.
So you dealt directly with Mr. Andries van Tonder?
Directly with Mr. Andries van Tonder, yes.
And how was your relationship with Mr. Andries van Tonder?
He was always my point of entry into the organization. We became very good friends.
Just remind me what his position at BOSASA was again.
Chair, he was the former CFO of the BOSASA group.
Thank you.
Yes, you were still telling the chair about your relationship with Mr. Andries van Tonder.
We became good friends, and Mr. Andries van Tonder also invited me and one of the audit partner at the firm, Darcy Herman, on hunting trips, so we became good friends.
Did you only meet Mr. van Tonder when you were involved in the auditing of BOSASA, or did you know him prior to that?
I met him when I was still with SARS.
With SARS. And
Yes.
in which year was this?
That was in around 2004.
Yes. Now, in paragraph 11 of your statement, you speak of certain events that transpired in or around the year 2014. Can you tell the chair what happened in this year?
Chair, paragraph 11 relates to the CARC, the company CARC, which was a prawn facility down in Port Elizabeth. BOSASA, don't know whether you say grow prawns or farm with prawns, but they specialized in that. They actually grew quite a bit of prawns, but due to bad publicity at the time, the banks wouldn't finance the project or the business, so they couldn't carry on. So they had to close it down, and they actually moved it up to Krugersdorp.
Okay, before you go into CARC, can you confirm the spelling of CARC, please?
Yes, it is capital S-E-A, capital A-R-K.
And is this a private company?
It's a subsidiary company of the BOSASA group.
Okay, and you were explaining that the main function of CARC related to growing prawns, as you put it.
That's right.
Now, are matters relating to CARC mentioned in your first statement, or the first statement, which is marked S8 and as referred to in Mr. Agrizzi's evidence?
Yes, correct. Mr. Agrizzi, and I just want to open up there. Mr. Agrizzi testified at the commission that I informed them that in order to retain the assessed loss of the company, I advised them to issue fraudulent invoices, which is totally incorrect.
Okay, before we go further, what is an assessed loss? And now here you're going to have to explain it in simple terms for everyone to understand.
An assessed loss would be where a company incurs a huge sum of expenses and only little income. So it would cause a loss. The expenses exceeded the income, there's a loss, and for tax purposes, as long as the company shows that it's trading, they can carry forward the assessed loss, which you then can offset against future profits. Meaning you wouldn't pay tax until you've exhausted the loss that's carried forward.
Now, you earlier mentioned that in Mr. Agrizzi's evidence, he stated that you had advised relative to this assessed loss. Before we go into who advised and who did not, who had calculated the assessed loss in relation to CARC?
The company would calculate the own assessed loss, then the auditors would conduct an audit confirming the assessed loss.
So when you say the company, in this respect, it is CARC that calculated
CARC itself and its accountants would then compile their own financial statements, which will then result or showing the loss, and the auditors will then conduct the audit confirming that. That is correct.
Yes, when the auditors confirm this, as you say, do they play any role insofar as the calculation of this loss?
They would check the validity for tax purposes, but no, the company would calculate the loss.
Now, what does one make of an assessed loss insofar as SARS? In other words, what would be the repercussions or benefit, if any, to a company if a company has an amount that is specified as an assessed loss?
Any future profits will be offsetted against that, and no tax will be paid on future profits until the loss is exhausted.
And let's just go back one step back. When you were explaining the role of the accountants of a company and the role of auditors in relation to assessed loss, you said the internal accountants of a company, and you must just tell me if I did not understand correctly, would calculate the loss, and then the auditors would look at that loss and check the validity of, I assume, both the calculations and that in fact it is a loss. Is that correct?
Correct, Chair.
So in other words, the auditors would seek, in the end, would the auditors have to give an opinion whether indeed a certain amount is what you call an assessed loss?
Chair, maybe just to elaborate on that, the auditors would they would check the calculation, which is the income and expenses to some extent, based on various factors, and then they would also consider various aspects. For example, did this company really trade? Because from a tax point of view, we would then claim that loss. Submit it to SARS, and SARS would allow it or disallow it or query it.
Yes. So in effect, would the company accountant say, this is how this loss was incurred, and this is how much the loss is? The company was trading at the time when these losses or this loss was incurred, and it is still trading. Yes. And then your job as the job of auditors would be to confirm that indeed that was a loss, and to confirm that the calculations were correct, and to confirm that the company was at the time trading.
Those are all the factors, Chair.
Okay.
You're right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Now, in relation to CARC, we were going to go to the first statement. That would be Exhibit S8, Chair. And in this statement, reference to CARC appears on page AA929 under paragraphs 21 to 25. Mr. Venter, in paragraph 21, in paragraph 21, which through the chair I would request you to read into the record, there is mention of CARC and this assessed loss. Can you read into the record what paragraph 21 states?
It says, pursuant to the closure of CR, Gavin Watson in a meeting clearly stipulated that he did not want to lose the assessed loss of approximately 138,498,378 rand as at the 2012 tax year, and Gavin Watson insisted, rather more instructed, that both Andries van Tonder and I do everything possible to maximize the use of the loss by filtering the tax exposure of profits into other operations via the entity.
Now, do you confirm whether that is true and correct?
Chair, these, especially these paragraphs of which relates to CARC, I did mention it that some of the wording were copied word for word from Mr. Andries van Tonder's statement into mine. I can just explain to you what I know, but I can recall that, remember that Mr. Gavin Watson didn't want to forfeit the assessed loss. That's true.
But do you, in substance, are you able to say what is said in paragraph 21 is correct? In substance, are you able to say it's factually correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you...
But apart from that, I'm sorry, apart
Thank you,
from that, did you want to elaborate or say anything in regard to what is in paragraph 21?
No, I think as we go on, Chair, I will elaborate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You were going to explain to the chair, having confirmed the truthfulness and correctness of paragraph 21 of the first statement, matters related to this assessed loss in respect of CARC. You confirmed that Mr. Watson did want to retain the status of an assessed loss. And your earlier evidence was that insofar as the role of auditors, it would be to confirm the correctness of the calculations of an assessed loss. So did you confirm, as Darcy Herman, auditors to BOSASA, did you confirm the correctness of this amount?
Yes, we did.
Well, Mr. Venter, I just want to explain something in relation to paragraph 21 to you, which will apply to other paragraphs which, about which maybe you have may have some concerns, like you have just said that this paragraph is one of those that are identical to someone else's paragraph in some affidavit. When, for example, you are asked, as I did a minute ago, to whether you confirm that in substance this paragraph is correct, just be alive to the fact that, for example, if, as is the case here they talk about what was said in a meeting. For example, here they say Mr. Gavin Watson said something in a meeting. If you don't remember whether it was in a meeting or somewhere else, then you need to say, I do remember that this was said, but I don't remember whether it was in a meeting or not. So I just want to alert you, because you may be cross-examined later on, so you need to satisfy yourself that when you say this is in substance correct, it is in substance correct. Okay?
Will do. Thank you, Chair.
But you stand by what we have said in regard to paragraph 21.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, but I also want to just mention that although some of the wording does come from the affidavit of Mr. Andries van Tonder, I also mentioned in the beginning that it's one of the paragraphs that was amended by Mr. Agrizzi.
Yes, okay. All right.
Thank you, Chair. Now, the latter part of paragraph 21 states there that Mr. Watson instructed, or rather more insisted, or rather more instructed, that both yourself and Mr. Andries van Donner do everything possible to maximize the use of the loss. And the last part says there, by filtering the tax exposure of profits in other operations via the entity. Was there anything untoward towards this process, or rather this approach that Mr. Watson wanted to adopt?
Chair, to answer that, according to my knowledge, I don't think so. And why I'm saying so is I've also advised them during this stage that when this CR project came to an end, that would they rent out some of the catering equipment that they've been using in this process. Trading or renting out, the leasing of equipment do constitute trade for tax purposes. That I advised them due to the fact that Mr. Watson didn't want to forfeit this loss. I did advise him that they could actually look at that.
Yes, and you do deal with that in the latter portion of your paragraph 11. Now, going back to the first statement, can you please read into the record paragraph 22, which also appears at pages AA9 to 9 of Exhibit S8?
I'm sorry, before he goes there, can you explain, please, that last sentence of, or is this paragraph one long sentence? Mr. Gavin Watson said that you and Mr. Van Donner should do everything possible to maximize the use of the loss by filtering the tax exposure of profits in other operations via the entity. What exactly did that mean? What exactly did that mean? What were you supposed to do?
I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure. I can't recall that it's my wording that's in that paragraph. But that's why I've elaborated that we had to look, or I did advise Mr. Van Donner that the leasing of equipment would be able to withstand in terms of motivating that the company were trading at the time. If they decide, that's all I can actually explain there. I wouldn't be able to explain that last sentence in that paragraph.
Well, that sounds strange to me, Mr. Venter, because Council asked you a few minutes ago whether there was anything untoward in regard to what Mr. Gavin Watson was saying you and Mr. Andries van Donner should do. And she referred to that last point in that paragraph. And you said you didn't think there was anything untoward. Now, I can't understand why you wouldn't think there's anything untoward if you don't even understand what it means.
Chair, just to elaborate there, I wasn't involved in anything illegal. So therefore, I think, in my opinion, everything that was done correctly. If anything was done untoward, I wouldn't know about it.
Yes, but Council says to you, look at the last sentence of paragraph 21. That's what she was drawing attention to it. And that last sentence says, you and Mr. Van Donner were asked to do everything possible to maximize the use of the loss by filtering the tax exposure of profits in other operations via the entity. Now, if you don't know what that means, I don't understand how your answer can be, no, there was nothing untoward in doing that, or in being instructed to do that.
Chair, I think I explain it more in the sense of, if I go back to my affidavit now, where Mr. Agrizzi explained that I advised that invoices should be fabricated in order to achieve certain things. I wasn't involved in any of that, but yes, from a tax point of view, advising them as to how they can utilize the assessed loss in the form of or not forfeiting the assessed loss. I surely did advise them, about what to do.
So, are you saying that you didn't understand this instruction from Mr. Gavin Watson to you and Mr. Van Donde?
According to my knowledge, Mr. Gavin Watson didn't want to forfeit the loss. And as a result of that, that's where the trading part comes in, where I advised him about leasing out the equipment. That's what I'm trying to explain here, Chair.
So, do you know or do you not know whether Mr. Gavin Watson instructed you and Mr. Van Donde to filter the tax exposure of profits in other operations via the entity?
No, Chair.
You don't know whether he gave that instruction?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
At any stage?
No. I know he was concerned about forfeiting the assessed loss.
Yes.
But that's what I know.
Okay, other than that, is there anything you don't understand in paragraph 21?
Chair, the part that you're referring to, that I do everything possible to maximize the use of the loss by filtering the tax exposure of profits into other operations. I think what it refers to is that the company's nature of the business changed. The company was then utilized as supply chain. The company name changed, the company's nature of the business changed to BOSASA supply chain management, and all the purchases went through this entity. Maybe that's what that last part of that sentence refers to.
But you are not sure?
I'm not sure. I think that's why I think it refers to that.
But if it means what you are saying, did Mr. Gavin Watson give an instruction to that effect? To you and Mr. Van Donde?
I don't know, Chair. He could have given it to Mr. Van Donde,
yeah.
But I can't recall
yes.
that any instruction was given to me personally.
Okay, I go back to my question. Is there anything else in paragraph 21 that you don't understand? Remember, you raised the concern that this paragraph was taken from somebody else's affidavit as it is, and then I asked you to say whether nevertheless in substance it is correct, and you said in substance it is correct. We have now learned that you don't understand that instruction in the last sentence, but I just want to make sure that whether there is anything else you don't understand in that paragraph.
No, I think
you understand everything
understand
else. You. Okay, all right, Ms. Mlefu.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Venter, in your answer earlier to the Chair, you stated that you were not involved in any illegality in the maximizing use of the loss. Now, am I correct to understand that there was room for illegality insofar as maximizing this assessed loss? Let me rephrase the question before you answer. Could there have been any unlawful action taken by BOSASA, or rather CARC in this case, in maximizing the use of this assessed loss?
Not what I can think about. Other than maybe, I mean, as the auditors, we would have conducted the audit on all the activities, all the transactions in the company, and as a result of that, I can't recall that that we issued a qualified report on that. So Chair, I think that maybe explains it a little bit better, that from an external point of view, from my colleagues conducting the audit, they would pick up anything that's been unlawful from an auditing point of view.
Thank you. Can we then move to paragraph 22, still on AA 929 of S8? Can you please read paragraph 22 into the record?
Andries van Tonder was instructed to change the main business of the company to incorporate provision for the company to utilize the assessed loss by inflating the purchase price of the raw materials to other contracts, thereby utilizing the company CARC as the newly changed BOSASA supply chain, which would handle all major purchases for the group, reselling the goods at the markup, thereby effectively reducing the profits of the other entities and averting having to pay tax on profits.
Now, do you have any knowledge on the truthfulness or correctness of this paragraph?
Chair, the name did change, the nature of the business did change, and all the purchases did go through this company. This company, in actual fact, became the supply chain for the group. And whether they've inflated prices there, I wouldn't know. My colleagues would have audited that, and nothing untoward was found with the audit. So I can't confirm any illegal activity in the paragraph.
Now, do you know why it would have been necessary to what seems as though it was an interpose through CARC in relation to BOSASA? Do you know why the main business of CARC was changed?
I can't comment on that, Chair. I mean,
You have no knowledge.
I have no knowledge about that,
Okay.
But you know that the main business of CARC was changed.
but it did change.
And what implication did this have on the tax implication of CARC?
Other than leasing out the equipment, which I recall they did do in order to retain the loss, they did do the supply chain through BOSASA supply chain company, and this company did make profits, if I remember correctly, and it was offset against the loss. So they did utilize the loss by doing this.
Now, did you have any involvement in changing the main business of CARC, whether it be through your advice or through any other involvement?
No, not at all, Chair.
Do you know on whose advice the company's main business was changed?
I think, and that's my opinion, I think it was based from an internal decision that was made.
And insofar as SARS is concerned, do you know whether there was anything untoward in the change of the main business?
No, not as far as I know, Chair.
Did Darcy Herman or yourself as a tax consultant have any discussion surrounding the change of the main business?
Chair, I think definitely from an auditing point of view, they would have discussed that with the audit partner, as he would have audited that the change of the nature of the business and the name and everything. So I can't comment on that, but surely my colleagues would be able to do that.
And did the change of the main business have any impact on the costs to CARC or BOSASA?
The cost did go through BOSASA supply chain management, and it was actually on sold to various companies in the group, which obviously I can't confirm that it was inflated, but surely BOSASA supply chain had the benefit of deducting the cost against or the profits that was made on the sale of those goods could have been utilized against the assessed loss, and obviously the other companies in the group would have claimed those expenses.
So if I understand it correctly, this change in the main business increased this assessed loss that you earlier spoke of?
No, BOSASA supply chain would have, if I remember correctly, they did make profits year by year after they've changed the nature of the business, and excuse me, and they were able to offset those profits against the loss.
So you're saying that there was no impact on this, the assessed loss status that CARC had at that moment?
The impact it had was that no tax would have been paid in BOSASA supply chain management because the profits was offsetted for a number of years against the loss. So it had definitely an impact on the company.
Yes. Can you then go back to page AA929 of S8? Can we go to paragraph 23 of that statement? Can you please read that into the record?
Paragraph 23, the value of this created an opportunity to evade tax on an amount of 38,779,546 rand. I was told that the documents and processes were fraudulently manufactured in order to win the SARS investigation by satisfying them that CARC did trade for tax purposes, which allowed the company to carry forward the assessed loss for future tax years.
Do you have any knowledge on the truthfulness or correctness of this paragraph?
Chair, what I can actually elaborate on there is that at the time when SARS conducted an audit on the CARC company, I've pulled in the services of a well-known tax attorney to assist me in order to answer this, to formulate the answers on the SARS query. And as a result of that, I've made use of a professional person who assisted me, and based on the information that was made available to the two of us, we successfully defended the assessed loss. We weren't involved in anything unlawful.
Well, the question that's been put to you is whether you know what is said in paragraph 23 to be true. Is what is said in paragraph 23 true?
No, it's not. According to my knowledge, Chair, no, it's not true.
What parts of it are not true? What parts of it are true? Or is the whole of paragraph 23 untrue? Or is the position that you don't know whether it is true or not?
Chair, the reason why I'm saying it's not true is that we didn't, it actually says that the opportunity to evade tax on an amount of 38 million. I was told that the documents and processes were fraudulently manufactured. I'm not aware of any of those information in this paragraph 23.
Adopt paragraph 23 as your evidence.
It's not mine.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. And you have just testified that you don't know whether there were any invoices fraudulently, documents and processes rather, fraudulently manufactured in order to win the SARS investigation.
Correct.
Is there anything that you wish to bring before the Chair in relation to paragraph 23?
Not, Chair, I disagree with that because as I actually explained that I did make use of another professional person to assist me, and all the information that was made available to us, we used that documents. We can't confirm the validity of that as it was given to us by the BOSASA group, Mr. Andries van Tonder.
So then you wouldn't know whether documents and processes were indeed fraudulently manufactured?
No.
Because as I understand it, you look at what is given to you and you work on based off that is given to you.
Correct.
We then move to paragraph 24, still on A29, S8. Please read that into the record.
SARS stipulated that proof had to be submitted to substantiate the claims and the argument of trade. Such proof was then fraudulently drawn up as a result of the changes made and the submissions made. SARS granted the allowance of the assessed loss.
Do you know whether that statement is true or not?
I'm not aware of anything that was fraudulently drawn up. I can't confirm that.
Do you have any knowledge on whether SARS stipulated that proof had to be submitted to substantiate the claims, and the argument of trade, such proof, which is said to have been fraudulently drawn up.
Yes, that was part of the SARS query that BOSASA had to prove trade in order to retain the loss. Yes, that was important. The trade aspect thereof was very important.
In substantiating this claim
Yeah,
and the argument of trade.
I can only comment to the extent of the trade portion, Chair.
Yes. As I understand, what you are saying is you are confirming that you know that SARS required proof to be submitted that would substantiate the claims, including the argument of trade. That you confirm that you know that SARS required that.
Yeah, SARS.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that I can confirm.
Yes, okay. In that paragraph, is that all you can confirm?
That's all I can confirm.
Okay.
And in submitting the substantiation that was requested or sought by SARS, what was Darcy Herman's involvement in that respect, if any?
That's where we would submit, would answer the query on behalf of the client, and that's where I made use of the external consultant's expertise as well, but it was submitted on our letterhead. We formulated the response to SARS on our letterhead.
But as you had earlier testified, you don't actually interrogate what is given to you by the client, in this respect, CARC. You accept it for what it is, and you work based off that document.
Correct. That's how we would do it.
And this is what happened in this case.
Correct.
Of course, you would query what the client gives you if it doesn't make sense to you, isn't it?
Yes, correct, Chair.
So you would not query it if everything seemed to be okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Can we then move to S8 again, page AA930, at paragraph 25? Can you please read that into the record?
The value of the fraudulent claims on CR is as follows. Then a calculation, the assessed loss was 138,498,378 Rand at 28%. So the tax value, the value of the assessed loss was 38,779,546 Rand. Expenses and equipment write-offs allowed by SARS pursuant to an investigation triggered.
Do you have any knowledge of that paragraph, of the correctness of that paragraph?
Yes, Chair, this is in actual fact correct because that was the assessed loss. The 28% is 38 million, and the loss resulted due to various write-offs.
Now, Mr. Venter, in the opening of paragraph 25, it
sorry
talks
about that.
Let me finish. It talks about the value of the fraudulent claims. Are you saying that that is true and correct?
Sorry, Chair, I just want to correct myself there. The calculation part from there downwards is correct, but the sentence, the value of the fraudulent claim on CR is as follows. I can't confirm that.
Is your query the adjective fraudulent? Other than that, you would be happy with that paragraph?
Yes, yes.
So if it said the value of the claims on CARC were as follows, then you would be happy with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm advised that it's now 11:15. Would this be a convenient time to take a
Yes.
short adjournment?
Okay, we'll take the tea adjournment and resume at 11:30. We adjourn. You may proceed, Ms. Mlefe.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Venter, before the short adjournment, we were still dealing with issues surrounding the ARC and the assessed loss. Now, before the introduction of CARC into the picture, insofar as BOSASA is concerned, the way I understand this is that the original position is such that BOSASA would procure whatever it is they sought directly from the supplier. Is this correct?
Can you just rephrase that? Are
Before the introduction of CARC, as a supply...
before the supply chain?
Yes. The position is such that BOSASA would procure directly from a supplier.
Correct.
Now, with the introduction of CARC, CARC would then stand in place of BOSASA and procure from the supplier at a certain amount.
Correct.
And CARC would then on-sells to BOSASA.
Correct.
Now, you earlier said that you have no knowledge on whether there was any inflation of costs insofar as CARC's involvement. Is that correct?
Yes. Chair, maybe I can just elaborate on that. I mean, from a business perspective, a company would sell goods at a profit, so they would put up a markup. But as to what the markup would be and how they've determined that, I wouldn't be able to explain.
Okay, perhaps let me make example of simple values. Before the introduction of CARC, BOSASA would procure services directly from a supplier at the cost of, say, 10 Rand, right? Now, with the introduction of CARC would procure it from whatever amount. We can stick to 10 Rand. We don't know what amount they would use. Then CARC on-sells to BOSASA at, say, an amount of 12 Rand. And in this amount of 12 Rand, you don't know whether this amount was in fact inflated. So it could have been higher than 12 Rand. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah, I wouldn't know.
So CARC then makes a profit of 2 Rand. Is that correct?
Correct.
Based on the figures we're working on.
Correct.
And this amount of 2 Rand is offset against the assessed loss. Is this correct?
Correct.
And CARC then pays no tax. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, when CARC on-sells to BOSASA we're working with the amount of 12 Rand, BOSASA is now paying, through the interpose of CARC, BOSASA is now paying an increased amount of 2 Rand, which therefore reduces its profits. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And therefore, BOSASA would be paying less tax. Is that correct?
No, it's yeah, you're correct because the expenses are more.
The expenses would have increased,
correct.
certainly.
Correct, yes.
Now, are you saying, through the interpose of CARC, at whatever value that it on-sells to BOSASA, CARC being a subsidiary of BOSASA, that there is no opportunity for tax fraud?
If they inflate the price to, which is maybe excessive, that could lead to that. And I wouldn't know whether that was excessive. My audit division would have audited that.
But you wouldn't know whether the amount was inflated or not.
If they've inflated it more than, look, Chair, I don't know what they decided what the price would be on this example. If they bought the goods for 10 Rand, they on-sold it for 12 Rand, maybe 14, or I don't know. But the higher they would sell it, yes, then they've inflated the price. I don't know how they've determined what the price would be.
That's fine. Now, going back to the interpose of CARC, would that not beg the question why the interpose or introduction of CARC into this process?
Thinking about it, yes, by doing it the way you've just explained it, which is the way it happened, they definitely benefited by using the loss, by using the company, which would then make a profit to on-sell, and those profits, they didn't pay tax on that. But you're right, that's That's what happened.
So I go back to my question. Do you not think that this could have created an opportunity for tax fraud, whether that actually happened or not?
Chair, maybe it could have, but I rely on my audit division to have done a proper job to have established that. And they, CARC, or Supply Chain Management, each year got a clean report, so I basically go on that. I can't comment other than that.
Well, Ms. Mulefa, maybe the problem is talking about an opportunity for tax fraud, because opportunities for something illegal are always there.
Indeed,
Many
Chair.
things. So what would be important is whether he has any knowledge that fraud occurred.
Certainly, Chair. Well,
Yes.
it seems to
So
be Mr. Venter's.
if there was an opportunity for fraud, but we don't know whether it was used, then the evidence
Certainly,
doesn't
Chair.
help much. Yeah. So it helps if he knows whether he knows what happened.
Indeed, Chair. There will be other evidence in that respect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Venter, can we then move back to your statement? We've been dealing with paragraph 11 on page 4 of your statement. Is there anything further that you would like to bring to the, pardon me, to the Chair's attention? Sorry, Chair.
Well, what is happening?
I keep pressing the microphone with my file.
Yes.
Apologies.
Okay.
Is there anything further that you'd like to bring to the attention of the Chair in respect of CARC?
No, Chair. I think I've explained it, what my involvement was, the SARS query that was raised, and that I made use of this external professional attorney, tax attorney, to assist me in order to deal with that. I just want to emphasize on that.
Thank you. In paragraph 13 of your statement, we are now back at Exhibit T10. Paragraph 13 of your statement, you deal with issues related to TRM. What is TRM?
TRM is a company.
Perhaps you can, sorry, can you please start with the full name of the company?
Tax Risk Management Services, and the abbreviation of that is TRM. It's a company of Dr. Daniel Erasmus, who is a well-known tax attorney, and he was the person who assisted me with the CARC query.
How does TRM relate to BOSASA or yourself?
Chair, I would like to mention maybe, and I did put it in my statement, that I've advised BOSASA that we should make use of the services of Dr. Erasmus, of Tax Risk Management Services. They were hesitant because Dr. Erasmus is a well-known litigator against SARS for tax, representing taxpayers, and they didn't want to attract attention. So they've asked me to, instead of contracting TRM services themselves, I should do it.
Yes, and
Oh, I'm sorry. You should contract TRM yourself
Yes.
for their benefit.
For their benefit, for the services to be rendered to them.
Yeah. Okay.
and when did this conversation take place? Can you remember roughly the year?
That's when the CARC audit was started, the SARS audit. I think it's in around 2013, if I'm not mistaken.
And in 2013, was Darcy Herman still providing auditing services to BOSASA?
Yes,
Were you still involved in that process
yes,
as a tax consultant
tax consultant.
on
Yes.
behalf of Darcy?
Correct.
Okay, so you have this conversation about introducing a company to avert any attention that may be drawn by, you call him Dr. Erasmus, who owned TRM. What then happens?
TRM services would then, I just want to maybe explain this as well. I've made use of a company, a dormant company, which belonged to a family member, to to raise the invoices. TRM services would, for the services of Dr. Erasmus, Dr. Erasmus TRM services would invoice this dormant company of a family member, which the dormant company was just not used. BOSASA asked me to register a new company, and I informed them that I've got a dormant company available. And as a result of that, TRM services invoiced a company called Miata.
You deal with that at paragraph 13.3
Miata
of
Trading
the
and Advisory Holdings. Chair, that was the dormant company. So I informed them that instead of registering a new company, that we could make use of this dormant company. And TRM services would then invoice this Miata and Advisory Holdings. And then Miata Trading and Advisory Holdings would then on-invoice BOSASA to recover the fees for Dr. Erasmus. That's the process.
Now,
I'm sorry, what was Miato's, or you said it was a dormant company?
It was a dormant company.
But after you decided to use it, was it doing anything other than really being, for all intents and purposes, just the post box for communication between your company or yourself and Dr. Erasmus's company?
Chair, it later, if I recall correctly, it later became more active. I later used it more actively.
Okay, all right, but initially not?
Initially not, it was just a dormant company.
Yeah, but I mean, after you had started using it for some time, it wasn't doing much other than
raising these invoices.
Yes, okay, but later on it became more active.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Chair. I do confirm that Miata is dealt with in later paragraphs. Now, you were explaining the interlink between TRM, Miata, and BOSASA. So, as I understand it, TRM would invoice Miata.
Correct.
And for what services would TRM specify?
Initially it was the services for the tax audit, and later it was various other services, whether it was other consultants of TRM that rendered services. It would be various other services later on. But initially it was just for the tax audit on SIOC. And then I think BOSASA was impressed with the company, Dr. Erasmus's company, so they also made use of other consultants, associates of Dr. Erasmus, who was employed in TRM services.
Yes, but let's go back a bit. So, TRM invoices Miata, and what is specified on the invoice is, you said, tax for consulting.
Yeah, it would be tax consulting services.
They would say tax consulting services. What would Miata then do with that invoice?
Chair, and as I was actually explaining in my affidavit, is that at some point I was called in by Mr. Agrizzi and Mr. Venter. Mr. Venter then would see me. They would then dictate the wording of the invoice of Miata to BOSASA, and then I would issue the invoice.
Okay. Carry on.
Should I deal with other paragraphs?
No. We're still on Miata and TRM. So TRM invoices Miata for a specific amount. You would then go to Mr. Agrizzi, you said, and Mr. Venter.
Yes.
Introducing a new invoice from Miata
To BOSASA.
to BOSASA. And what would you specify on Miata's invoice?
It all depends the wording that was dictated to me by Mr. Venter.
So, insofar as the amount that would have been invoiced by TRM, would Miata use the same amount, or a lower amount, or a higher amount?
Chair, the process would be that they would dictate the wording for me, and they would also explain to me what the value of the invoice should be. It was always an inflated value in order to provide for a commission for Mr. Agrizzi, Mr. Venter, and myself.
Okay, and when Miata would have this wording that would be dictated by Mr. Agrizzi and Mr. Venter, as you said, what would be the other references in the invoice other than what one would think would be for tax consulting services? What other services would Miata specify in invoicing BOSASA?
Chair, it all depended. They would dictate the wording as it would come up in their heads. I don't know. It would vary. It wasn't any fixed wording that was used. It was wording every time. It might have been different. I have to go and check on the invoices what wording were used, what description would be. But they would dictate the wording to me.
So the wording would be false?
Would be correct, but they would have added something else. They would have added to the description.
Well, how can that be the case if Miata is not providing any service to BOSASA?
That was in order to raise a higher invoice to BOSASA. Therefore, the description was added to in order to raise a higher invoice to BOSASA.
But I think the question is, Ms. Molefe asked you whether the wording that was dictated to you by Mr. Agrizzi or Mr. Venter was false. And as I understood your answer, you were not saying it was false. And she is now asking, how could that wording not be false when, in fact, Miata was not providing any service to BOSASA?
No, that's correct, Chair. Some of it would be correct, and the wording added to it would be then not correct.
But I think the question is more fundamental than that. Namely, the fact of the matter is Miata was not providing any service to BOSASA. Is that not correct?
Correct, other than just recovering the fee from TRM services, but you're correct.
And what was being done was to make a representation that Miata was providing certain services to BOSASA, which it was not providing. Is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
Yes.
And I just want to elaborate as well. I did question that, but I was told by the two gentlemen not to worry because both of them were signing off on those invoices.
You want to continue?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Venter, the essence really of my question is, there's three companies involved in this process. It's TRM, which is the company that's providing the service. Is this correct?
Correct.
Then there's the introduction of Miata, which is not providing any services to BOSASA. Is that correct?
That's correct.
TRM is invoicing Miata. Is that correct?
Correct.
But now Miata is invoicing BOSASA, is not invoicing for any specific service having actually been provided by Miata. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In addition to that, Miata is invoicing at a higher inflated amount than TRM's invoice, and this is for purposes of a commission, as you stated.
Correct.
And this commission is shared by, amongst other people, yourself as well.
Correct.
Now, when one considers what the cost implication is to BOSASA, and I would make again the same comparison as I did with CARC and its interposition insofar as BOSASA, would you agree that the same set of circumstances may exist insofar as TRM and Miata and then BOSASA? Except in this case, Miata is not even providing any services to BOSASA.
That's correct.
The invoices that came from TRM went to Miata, is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
And were addressed to Miata, is that right?
Correct.
And represented, did they not, that TRM had provided services to Miata, is that right?
In actual fact, it rendered services to the BOSASA group, Chair.
Yeah, but
But
if they provide an invoice to Miata, one would ordinarily expect that the invoice is on the basis that Miata is the client. But are you saying that that's not what was reflected in the invoice? The invoice reflected that although the invoice was directed at Miata, but it was for services rendered in respect of SIAC.
Or some of the BOSASA companies, Chair, correct.
Yes, but I'm now quite more interested in how the invoices appeared, what was reflected in the invoices. Did the invoices reflect that TRM had provided services to or in respect of SIAC?
Yes, correct,
They did
Chair. The
yes.
description on those invoices
Yes.
would be for, yeah,
Yes.
would be like that.
So from TRM side, they might not have misrepresented anything in
No.
the sense that they would have represented that they had provided services to SIAC, but they were simply sending the invoice to Miata because that's what they had been told would be the entity that would pay or something.
Yes, correct, Chair.
Yes. But once Miata issued an invoice to BOSASA for services that it had not rendered, then that's where the problem was.
Correct,
And of course, in the inflation of prices as well.
correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
You earlier confirmed that during this period where Miata was invoicing BOSASA and through a company that you introduced, you were employed with Darcy Herman.
That's correct.
And Darcy Herman was still auditing the books of BOSASA.
That's correct.
So did Darcy Herman know of your involvement in Miata?
No, they didn't.
And so when they would be providing these auditing services to BOSASA, in relation to Miata and the inflated prices that Miata was charging, notwithstanding that no services were actually provided, they would not be doing so on not necessarily correct figures, but they would be doing so on the basis of a fraudulent invoice, basically.
Yeah, they would conduct the audit based on the invoice that they would see. And that would be, I mean, the purchases of BOSASA were huge. It was millions. So this was just small in relation to maybe to select a sample, maybe, from an auditing point of view.
Yes. And in auditing BOSASA, this would be on a figure that would have been higher than the figure that would have been used had the invoice been considered been the invoice from TRM. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
So in effect, whether intentionally or not, the introduction of Miata also increased the cost of BOSASA. Is this correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. And did the auditors pick this up?
No, they didn't.
Why not?
I suppose, as I explained, that it wasn't in terms of value-wise. Even if they've selected that as part of the sample, there would be an invoice for that. So they would have checked the invoice, and they would have checked the payment towards that. So that's how they might have checked it.
Now, I would assume that they would also check the business function that Miata ordinarily provides, not so?
I don't think necessarily that would happen. If they see an invoice, they see a payment, I think that should be sufficient proof that a transaction took place.
But now, just looking at an invoice, how does an auditor then test on whether such an invoice is fraudulent or not?
Chair, as I'm not the auditor, I wouldn't be able to explain that in detail, and I would rather not try and attempt to do that.
Well, I guess that auditors would work on the basis of samples, and unless they had some information that made them suspect that there was something wrong about a certain invoice, they would assume that it should be a legitimate invoice. You don't know whether that's how they work.
I think that's how they work, Chair, and they would also check whether the amount is material, whether it's in the bigger scheme of how big BOSASA really is.
Yeah. Miata, you kind of resuscitated it when it had been dormant. I can't remember from your statement. Who was operating Miata after you resuscitated it?
I used it, Chair, for various things, and later I terminated it. It only operated for approximately 2 years or so.
Yes. During the time that you operated it, were you reflected as a director or member? I can't remember if it was a CC, or were you reflected on the records as somebody holding a particular position within Miata?
Initially, I was. The intention was to change it, the directors, sorry, the directorship and shareholding, but it wouldn't have been. It was only used for that single purpose initially, for TRM, and later on it was used for other things as well, and then it stopped. But I considered myself to be the financial manager of the business.
Yes, and the directors, the owners of the entity, were they aware or that you were operating it?
It was a family member, and I took it over from the family member, yes.
Yes. So on paper, not much might have changed, but in reality, you operated it from a certain time to a certain time.
Correct.
Yes. And the money that, did it get any money as such, other than whatever commission you might have got from BOSASA arising out of its involvement?
Yes, Chair. I did use it later on for various other small transactions as well,
Yes.
which was recorded,
Okay.
in the company.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just to take the chair's question further, in Miata, was, other than the family member who owned this company, were there any other directors listed in that company?
Not what I'm aware of. No.
Was it only the family member?
Yes.
Okay, and you said that this invoicing by Miata started in or around the year 2013.
I don't think. No, because the company was only resuscitated in 2016, if I remember correctly. So the invoices, thinking about it now, Chair, obviously then BOSASA must have invoiced them directly at the time. Just makes sense. Then it was changed later on.
So are you now saying that your discussion around the involvement of Miata would have only taken place in the year 2016 and not 2013?
Yes.
And for how long did this practice continue?
It stopped when Mr. Agrizzi left the BOSASA group, if I remember correctly. That was in December 2017. January 2018, I think, the last invoice, but relating to December 2017.
Well, in paragraph 14 on page 7 of your statement, you state there that the last invoice issued was in January 2017, and with reference to Mr. Agrizzi, you say that he left in December 2016.
Okay. My apologies. Yes, Chair. I didn't look at paragraph 14. That's correct. I'm a year out. It stopped in December 2016, January 2017, last invoice.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, what do we amend there in terms of the year? Or do we not amend anything?
No, Chair. Mr. Venter is changing his oral evidence. He
Oh.
had earlier stated that the practice stopped likely in January 2018.
Yeah.
He's now making reference to his statement, which is January 2017.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Venter, are there any other further matters that you wish to bring to the attention of the Chair in respect of TRM, Miata, and BOSASA?
No, that's it, Chair.
Thank you. Now, at paragraph 15, you speak of events that took place at the beginning of 2016. Can you please tell the Chair what took place in the year 2016?
Chair, BOSASA had it wasn't a company of BOSASA, it was an independent company called Concilium Business Consultants, who was owned by Dr. Smith. I think he was one of the founders of the BOSASA group, if I remember correctly. Dr. Smith registered Concilium Business Consultants many years ago as a labor broker company, who would then provide labor broking services to the BOSASA group. That was the purpose of Concilium. And in 2016, Dr. Smith was diagnosed with cancer. And I was approached by Andries van Tonder on behalf of Gavin Watson to take over Concilium Business Consultants, as it was not part of the BOSASA group. So I couldn't be involved formally in my capacity as part of Darcy Herman at the time. So I actually recommended that a family member could become the director and shareholder of the company, who actually became the shareholder and director of the company. And then later on, Dr. Smith did pass away, and that's what Concilium is all about.
Is Concilium, do you have any knowledge of reference to Concilium in the first statement, which is marked as S8 in Mr. Agrizzi's testimony?
Concilium, as I've said, Chair, that it provides a labor broking services to the BOSASA group. Instead of employing the people in the various companies of the BOSASA group, Concilium would employ them. I mean, there was no real commercial reason why those employees couldn't be employed in those various companies. But I can't explain as to why it was done. I just took it over. I managed this company. We handled the payroll. Darcy Herman would get a fee, a retainer fee every month, and we actually paid the employees from the payroll. So it was just the payroll. We would invoice 3 of the BOSASA companies in order to get the income in. The 3 companies where most of the people we employed in, we would get the fees in, and we would pay the salaries over to those employees.
Okay, I need to take you several steps back, Mr. Venter. Can we refer to page AA924?
Before that, can I just find out, Mr. Venter, when you were involved in this company, Concilium, were you still employed as a tax consultant in the firm, what was it known later on, Darcy?
Darcy Herman, yes.
Yes, you were still employed there. So your dealings with BOSASA were at 2 levels. One, either as a tax consultant or as somebody involved in this company as well.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
Darcy Herman would provide that service because we invoiced Concilium for rendering those services.
Thank you.
Okay, can we go to AA924 of S8? Can you please refer to paragraph 9 in that statement?
Yes.
Please read that paragraph into the record.
All Gavin Watson's family members who renders no service to the BOSASA group are also on the payroll. Gavin Watson instructed me to keep this very confidential, and I wasn't allowed to discuss this with anybody else other than him.
Do you know whether that statement is true or not?
Chair, according, that's where I've made the correction on page 7, paragraph 15, is that I was told that everybody was employed that was on the payroll of Concilium. Concilium had its own external auditors who would then confirm or check the employment contracts of the various employees. So I didn't go and check it myself. I was just told that everybody on the payroll was employed and rendered some sort of a service to the BOSASA Group.
Okay, and earlier you've confirmed that Concilium was not a subsidiary to BOSASA. It provided labor broking services.
Correct.
Now, in paragraph 9 of the first statement, as you refer to it, it states there that no services were rendered to the BOSASA Group by persons employed. In fact, let me not interpret it as I'm doing. My apologies. Paragraph 9 states that no services were provided by Gavin Watson's family members. Do you have any knowledge of that?
Chair, the only knowledge I do have is that some of the family members were paid from the payroll. And as far as I know, they did render a service. Even Mr. Watson's daughter was paid from there. Mr. Watson's brother was paid from there. So the little bit of knowledge I do have is that they were involved. So the statement there was included by Mr. Agrizzi at the time. He amended that paragraph.
So earlier when you amended your statement, on paragraph 15 at page 7, you amended it to read as, I was told that all the family members of Mr. Gavin Watson, and so the sentence continues. Now, are you saying that you knew for a fact that they provided a service, or are you still sticking to what you say here, where you say, I was told that all of the family members of Mr. Gavin were rendering services?
Chair, I was told by Dr. Smith, who was a very well-known person in the BOSASA organization, being one of the founder members, I believe. He was respected, very well respected. Everybody in the group, whether they would have been a director or not, employee, would have gone to Mr. Smith, Dr. Smith, for advice. So I accepted his word that all employees employed in the Concilium company was rendering a service to the company.
And what services were they said to be rendering to the company?
It would have been various services. That's why I just want to come back to my opening statement that I can't see any reason why they shouldn't have been employed in the company itself, because Concilium would invoice those companies, get the fees in, and pay them over across. I mean, it didn't make sense. There was no need for that, but that's the way it was done. That's why I've taken it over. Okay.
What services were they said to be rendering?
Those people were employed in various companies in the group, whether it was marketing, whether it was advisory, whether it was all sorts of services they would render.
But the final position is that you have no personal knowledge whether any of Mr. Watson's family members did actually provide a service or services. You were simply told, and all you are saying is you are assuming that whoever told you was correct.
Correct, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. You earlier mentioned invoicing by Concilium to BOSASA. Can you explain that to the Chair?
Chair, they would, that was the practice that we took over, is that the salaries would be various people. A specific person might have rendered services in more than one company, so their services would be allocated to 2 or 3 different companies, and based on the allocations, those different companies would be invoiced for the services that's rendered in that company. That's how the cost was split into the various companies of the BOSASA group.
So
makes sense.
To which companies would Concilium invoice?
It was BOSASA Operations, BOSASA Youth Development Centers, and I think, if I remember correctly, Corona Financial Services.
So would these be for different services provided within Concilium to the three companies, or would this be a duplication?
It's normal salary employed people in those companies that was paid.
Okay, no. You are saying that Concilium would issue invoices to BOSASA, Sondolo, and BOSASA Youth Development. Is that correct?
Correct?
And you are saying that these invoices would be for services provided. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you have earlier stated that, as far as you know, some of the family members of Mr. Watson were employed with Concilium. So, as I understand it, the invoicing of these services would be for those services provided.
Correct.
Now, when invoicing each specific entity, would this be for the same service provided to each specific entity, or would this be a duplication?
No, it's not a duplication. It would be for the specific service.
So there would be 3 invoices issued to BOSASA operations, and this would be for services provided.
Correct.
And there would be another invoice to Sondolo, different from that of BOSASA operations,
Correct.
for services provided. And there would be a third invoice to BOSASA Youth Development for services provided.
Correct.
And how frequent was this invoicing?
Monthly invoicing, because the people we employed in Concilium rendering those services to the various companies.
But where was each invoice that was sent to a particular entity for services rendered to that entity, or was the position that services would be rendered to entity A, but the invoice in relation to those services would be sent to different entities?
Chair, a spreadsheet was prepared to monitor who was employed in what company and would they render services in more than one company. And based on the salaries paid to them, that's how the costing were done to those 3 entities.
Yeah,
Does
my question, which may be what part of what Ms. Molefe also wanted to know at some stage, is if entity A, if services were rendered to entity A, and entity A is a BOSASA entity, would the invoice that relates to the services rendered to entity A be sent to entity A only, or would another invoice also be sent to another entity, but in respect of services rendered to entity A?
No, Chair. Only to entity A for the services rendered to entity A.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. And you have confirmed that this was on a monthly basis.
Correct.
And what was the purpose, and just clarify the purpose of invoicing BOSASA on a monthly basis? Because the way you have explained what is, according to your knowledge, the services provided by the Watson family members, you seem to state that it was in an employee role. They were providing employee services. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, if they were providing employee services, why were they not being paid by Concilium as its employer, as their employer rather?
It's a good question. I don't see really the purpose for Concilium existing, because those people employed in various companies, rendering a service to all the companies in the BOSASA group, they could have been employed there. So, yes, I wouldn't be able to explain. I just took it over from Dr. Smith at the time.
So, do you know whether Concilium was paying any salaries to these persons who were said to be employed by Concilium?
Yes, they were paying the salaries to the employees employed in Concilium.
So, in addition to being paid by Concilium, Concilium is then invoicing the 3 BOSASA subsidiaries for basically the same thing, for salaries, as one can.
To recover the salaries of those employees employed in Concilium. That was the source of Concilium's income, was the 3 invoices to the BOSASA group.
Now, you earlier stated that you were somewhat involved in Concilium. Is this correct?
Excuse me, just repeat the question.
Were you involved in Concilium?
Yes, we were handling the payroll for them every month. We took it over from Dr. Smith.
And you individually, were you involved in Concilium?
No, I wasn't. No.
Okay. Now, in making payment to employees, can you make an example of any one employee whom you know would have been paid and how this would have worked insofar as payment by Concilium and invoicing of Concilium to BOSASA subsidiary companies?
One person, for example, Mr. Peter Riga was employed in Concilium. He handled all the purchases or the purchase requisitions of goods in the BOSASA group. So he was employed in the company. Whatever his employment contract stipulated how much he should be paid, that was monitored on the spreadsheet and recovered at month end to the particular BOSASA company.
Can you recall how many employees were paid by Concilium?
Approximately 25 employees or so.
In paragraph 15.2 of your statement, you make reference to payment of various employees. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you please explain that to the chair?
I've stated in 15.2, I paid various other employees such as Mr. Cecilia Siopela salary per month via Concilium. Mr. Siopela was, for example, a consultant in a consultancy position in the BOSASA group, and he was employed, he had an employment contract, we would have listed his name on the spreadsheet, recover his salary from the BOSASA group and paid it over to him. Basically the same as all the others.
And do you know what consultancy services he provided?
I'm not too sure, Chair. You would be involved in an advisory services consulting position. I know you work closely with Mr. Watson in an advisory position, so that's all I know.
So Mr. Cecilia Siopela would be paid by Concilium. Would you have processed this payment?
Yes.
In addition to that, Concilium would then invoice one of the 3 companies.
Correct.
For the services said to have been provided by
Correct.
Mr. Siopela.
Correct.
Thank you. And as you've stated, according to your knowledge, Mr. Siopela provided advisory consultancy services. Had you ever seen Mr. Watson and Mr. Siopela together?
On many occasions, yes.
And did you know what the nature of their interaction was about?
No. Sometimes I was involved where Mr. Siopela would sit in, where certain matters would have been discussed and you would have commented or whatever, but never, I can't really elaborate in more detail as to what he did, but I know it was advisory consulting.
And do you know whether there were any employment contracts drafted for employees said to be employed by Concilium?
Most definitely, because being a labour broker company, the company had another set external auditors who would have checked that. As a labour broker company, I suppose that's one of the things you would check, is the employment contracts.
And you earlier stated that there was another company providing external audit services to Concilium. Is that correct?
That's correct. They had their own set of auditors.
Had you seen any of the contracts?
Yes, I recall that the auditor at one of the audits, one of the years which he was auditing, he did request some of the employment contracts. And the lady internally that worked with that did make that available to him. So yes, I do recall there were, and it was requested for, but I haven't seen it myself.
And in providing these external auditing services, do you know whether the company would have just taken a sample of the contracts, or seeing that you say there was only about 25 employees, whether they would have looked at all the contracts?
I think, Chair, I can't really explain as to what they've done, but being only 25 contracts, I suppose it was easy maybe to have checked all of them.
Do you know of any findings, audit findings by this external auditor?
No,
Or report?
Chair, no negative audit findings. As I've seen the financial statements, which Dr. Smith did show me on various occasions, no qualified report, so that means that the auditor was satisfied.
But you have earlier stated that this is what you were told and you have no personal knowledge.
Correct.
In paragraph 16 of your statement, you then deal with events relative to the drafting of your first statement.
Okay, excuse me, Chair, can I just conclude maybe on paragraph 15?
Yes.
Certainly.
Yes.
I wanna make mention that that Mr. Angelo Agrizzi, Mr. Andries van Tonder, and Mr. Gavin Watson was also paid from Concilium. They were the only 3 employees paid from Concilium, although they were paid from the BOSASA group as well. All the other employees were only paid from Concilium, but the 3 of them was also paid from Concilium.
Yes,
Okay,
and
thank you.
in paying the payments of the 3 gentlemen you've mentioned, do you know whether the same process of invoicing the BOSASA subsidiary companies was also followed?
Yeah, the same process followed. Invoice, they were included into the spreadsheet, and money were recovered from the BOSASA 3 companies, and they were paid salaries, and RP5s was issued to them. But they were the only 3 gentlemen that was paid from Concilium, but also from the BOSASA group.
Yes.
Who were the directors of Concilium at the time, or owners?
It was Dr. Smith, who was the shareholder director, just up until shortly he passed away.
He was the only
He was
owner.
the sole director
The
and
sole director.
shareholder at the time.
Yes.
Up until, it was
Now,
changed.
Mr. Agrizzi and Mr. Watson and Mr. Van Tonder, I think that those are the 3 people you just mentioned.
Correct.
What did the records of Concilium reflect them as?
As employees, Chair, I can't recall what the description,
Whether any particular positions were?
what the positions were, but
But
they were considered employees.
They were reflected as employees of Concilium as
Correct.
well. Okay.
Thank you. Are you ready to proceed with your next paragraph, Mr.
Thank you.
Venter?
Yes.
You deal with circumstances relating to the drafting of your first statement. When or how did it come about that the statement be drafted?
Chair, during November 2017, I was called by Mr. Agrizzi and Mr. Van Tonder to come and see them at the house of Mr. Agrizzi in Four Ways. And upon my arrival, they told me that I should do a statement. All of them were busy doing affidavits, which would reveal the illegal activities of Mr. Watson. And they've asked me to prepare a similar statement, and they would assist me in doing all of that. I still recall sitting next to Mr. Andries van Tonder, and I can't remember whether he did finalize his statement at the time, but he had his statement on his computer, and he guided me through the processes as to what they really want. And Mr. Agrizzi would dictate some of the wording. because I've been telling him, I was good friends with Mr. Venter, so, and Mr. Venter and Mr. Agrizzi would remind me of certain events or certain things that happened which they wanted me to include into their statement. For example, various payments I've made on behalf or on instruction of Mr. Gavin Watson.
So you said in November 2017, were you still employed with Darcy Herman?
Correct.
And you said that the purpose was to expose certain illegal activities.
Correct.
When you were informed of this purpose, did Mr. Agrizzi or Mr. Venter at any point request you to fabricate information in exposing these illegal activities?
No, they didn't. They wanted me to put into the statement information which I'm aware of and which I had in my possession, proof of payments and all of that. That's what I had to put into the statement.
And
I'm sorry, when they asked you to make a statement that would expose illegal activities, what was your immediate reaction to that?
Chair,
Were
just
you agreeable? Did you have to be persuaded to do it, or you agreed without any hesitation?
Chair, I can state that I didn't want to do it, and that's where Mr. Agrizzi came in and he said to me that he showed me how serious this thing is. We were sitting at his patio table at the back, and the table was full of files, and he showed me all the evidence, all the documents and paperwork they've accumulated over time, which was placed in files. And he said to me, you can go through the files and see what we've got. So he really scared me of what he accumulated. And he said to me that you need to now, you've got a choice. You either go down with Watson or you prepare a statement like we've done. That's basically it.
And what decision did you then take?
Chair, you also said to me that Mr. Agrizzi you wouldn't go against him. It's almost the same as with Mr. Watson. They would destroy you. He threatened me by this TRM commission. He said to me that he would expose me with that. And also many years ago, the TRM, those TRM invoices that we've done, we've discussed previously. He said to me that that would come out, and also that many years ago they built a boundary wall for me. So he actually threw all of that in front of me. He said to me, you don't have a choice. Do you want to go down with Watson, or do you want to do this?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, you earlier said that during the drafting of the statement, they would remind you of certain facts. Can you explain that? Would the facts that they reminded you of, as you put it, factually correct or not?
They were factually correct, yes.
And when you say that Mr. Agrizzi could destroy you, and you point to an instance where he referred to TRM, I understand this to be in relation to Miata. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when he also spoke about a boundary wall that had been built, had a boundary wall indeed been built for you?
Correct. Many years ago, but yes.
And were you employed with Darcy Herman or any auditing firm that worked with BOSASA?
I think it was still the Best of You Incorporated days, many years ago.
And can you explain the circumstances around the building of that wall?
Yes, I was doing some renovations at the house. I've asked Mr. Venter for a reliable contractor, and he referred me to, he said to me that he will get somebody that he knows, and he referred Rukele Construction to me. I believe Rukele Construction was also doing various construction work for the BOSASA group, and they gave me a quotation, I gave the go-ahead, and when it came to payment, they insisted that they would pay it.
So why would Mr. Agrizzi use that as an incident that he could use to destroy you?
That wasn't declared anywhere.
Okay.
The things that Mr. Agrizzi reminded you of, or that, as I understand your evidence, you say he used to threaten you into making a statement, were they things that were true but which you would have liked not to be exposed, or were they things that were not true about you?
All true, Chair. You would have used that, yeah. All true.
So it was information that he was aware of about you.
Correct.
That was true, but which you would not be happy if it was exposed.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So you're now at Mr. Agrizzi's house. It is yourself and Mr. Fantoner, is that correct?
Mr. Agrizzi, Mr. Fantoner, yeah, and some family members of Mr. Agrizzi, yes.
And the purpose of this meeting really is to draft the statement that would expose Mr. Watson. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you earlier said that at no point did Mr. Agrizzi request you to fabricate any information. Is
No.
that correct?
No, yes,
Did
correct.
Mr. Agrizzi or Mr. Fantoner at any point request you to omit any information?
No, they really wanted everything in the statement to reveal as much as possible.
And in relation to Mr. Fantoner, do you know whether he was requested to fabricate any information?
I'm not aware of that, Chair. I think at the time he was nearly done with his statement.
Okay, so you were both at the house drafting your respective statements.
Chair, I think he might have concluded and he signed already by that time, but he did open it up on his computer. But if I remember correctly, you can check the dates, but I think he might have had it commissioned already at that point in time. I'm not too sure.
So you're at the house, you're hesitant to draft the statement, but you agree to draft the statement.
After seeing everything that the gentleman had on the table, what they've told me and so on, I felt uncomfortable, but I decided to do it. I agreed to do it.
Did you personally draft the affidavit?
I did. They explained to me how it should be done. So I did type the introductory part of it, and then they would remind me of certain things that I should put in.
Okay, can we then go to this first statement, which is Annexure S8 to Mr. Agrizzi's bundle. On page A922, and you needn't read out the identity number stated there or your address. What is at the top there is affidavit of Petrus Stephanus Venter, is that correct?
That's correct.
At the very top, can you read into the record what is written there?
Context of tax fraud and racketeering by Gavin Watson.
No, that's written below. At the top, what is written there? The header of the document.
Final, Petrus Stephanus Venter, highly confidential, G. Watson, tax fraud.
And underneath, affidavit of Petrus Stephanus Venter and the address, what is written there? I interrupted you when you read that sentence, the one starting with context.
Context of tax fraud and racketeering by Gavin Watson.
And without reading your personal information in the paragraph that follows, as well as the residence that is stated there, can you read that into the record, please?
In other words, don't read
Leave out the residence.
video
Yes,
address
please.
and so on, but
My full name's starting there.
Yes, please.
My full names are Petrus Stephanus Venter, a white male, age 46, resident at so-and-so, hereby declare that the attached affidavit and the annexes labeled files 1 to 2 are a true reflection of the occurrences at BOSASA Group of Companies / African Global Operations and the dealings of Mr. Gavin Watson.
Did you type that statement?
I didn't type those paragraphs.
Okay, well,
I did type, obviously, Chair, I did type in my address, being what it is, and it was altered by Mr. Agrizzi.
And which portion of it was altered?
I wouldn't have known the files, for example, that the files were built by Mr. Agrizzi. That's one. The annexes to this, I merely printed the documents and I gave it to him, so he prepared all of that. And it says, are a true reflection of the occurrences at BOSASA. That's not entirely true.
Okay, and the paragraph that follows, please read that into the record.
The statements made are, in my opinion, factual, substantiated by records and copies of invoices and receipts. The intention hereof is not to seek monetary gain, but to clear mine and related parties' names after being accused and forced to conduct what we realize what instructions from Gavin Watson. This matter has affected my health and relationship.
And the first part, where it states that the statements are made in your opinion, are factual and substantiated by records and copies of invoices and receipts. Can you comment on the truthfulness of that?
All the records attached, the annexes to this, that I did provide to Mr. Agrizzi, but the first opening statement referring to the statements made are, in my opinion, factual, substantiated by records. The statement made are, in my opinion, factual. I don't fully agree with that.
And why do you not agree?
Because this statement was amended by Mr. Agrizzi.
But you've just stated that the records were provided by yourself.
All the annexes to this, I did print and give it to Mr. Agrizzi, but he did amend this statement.
But were the records...
Sorry. The noise there is disturbing the witness and everybody.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, please proceed.
So the records that you provided, did you know them to be correct?
Chair, I haven't seen the attachments to this, but I did print a lot of documents which I did hand to Mr. Agrizzi, and I believe that to be the annexes he's referring to. Yes.
And the sentence that follows there states that the intention is not to seek monetary gain, but to clear mine, this being you, and related parties' names. Do you have any comment to this?
I didn't type that. That must have been included by Mr. Agrizzi, but that was the intention explained to me by them.
Okay, was there any promise of monetary gain?
No monetary value, no reward.
By Mr. Agrizzi?
Mr. Agrizzi later on, I was worried about this, Chair. There was no reward. Mr. Agrizzi, I was worried in the sense of if I made this statement, that would mean I would lose my job because we would lose also the audit of BOSASA. So, and because of that fact that I expressed my concerns to Mr. Agrizzi, we did later on in the affidavit, I think in the new affidavit, he asked me, how much do you want? I'll pay you. Join our grouping going against Mr. Watson. And if I recall correctly, the amount that was discussed was, Mr. Agrizzi even showed me on his cell phone what the value of all his investments were. And he said to me, how much do you want? If I remember correctly, the amount was about 335,000 rand a month. He said that he would pay if I signed this and I would join his grouping.
And in Mr. Agrizzi promising this payment to you, did he at any point request you to provide fabricated information?
No.
Did he, after making this offer to you, request you to omit any information?
No.
So the payment would be purely to substantiate your salary, as I understand it.
Yes, because I expressed my concern that I would lose my job if I would sign this, and I would testify against Mr. Watson.
So, was his offer to pay you the amount that he said he would pay you, was that offer meant to make sure that you didn't stop or you didn't refrain from exposing illegal activities that you were aware of simply because you were scared of losing your job? In other words, was the intention of that offer meant to make sure that you could expose the illegal activities, knowing that if you lost your job, you would still be fine in terms of finance?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
The statement goes further to say that it is the intention, it's not to seek monetary gain, but to clear mine and related parties' names. Can you comment on the truthfulness of that?
Chair, that was included by Mr. Agrizzi, but if I read it, they wanted us to expose Mr. Watson for what he demanded from us to do. That was, I think, the purpose of that sentence.
Yes, and the following sentence says, after being coerced and forced to conduct what we realize, and I think there's an error there, but it says, what instructions from Gavin Joseph Watson. Can you comment on the truthfulness of that?
Chair, yes, I mean, any instruction from Mr. Watson, you wouldn't dare going against him. If you do that, that's the end of you. I think that's what the gentleman tried to explain there. Certainly not my wording, but I can see what they've meant with that, with the wording.
And can you...
You have said repeatedly that in asking you to join his group and make a statement, or to make a statement exposing what you have described as illegal activities, you have said repeatedly that Mr. Agrizzi was not asking you to make any fraudulent allegations or to say anything that you knew not to be true, and he was not asking you to leave out anything that you wanted to include. Now, when you say that if anybody went against Mr. Agrizzi, that would be their end. Can you explain that? What would he do? What would he use? Would he use any illegal means to destroy a person, or would he look at what they may have done and expose that? What are you talking about?
Exactly that, Chair. You would look what you have done, you would use that against you, to expose you. Exactly what he did.
He would simply take advantage of his knowledge of some of the things that you may have been involved in that are not right.
Correct.
And then expose them.
Correct.
Okay.
And as we go on with the statement, Chair, it will come out later how we actually used that against me.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and the last sentence there says that this matter affected my health and relationships. Do you have any comment on that?
Chair, he actually constantly, I was under pressure from Mr. Agrizzi, even though I didn't sign. Let me just say, this refers to Mr. Watson. Sorry, let me just quickly read that, Chair. Yes, Chair, what was meant by that, also again included by Mr. Agrizzi, he knew I didn't feel comfortable with the instructions that was given to me by Mr. Watson. That's what I can read into that.
So are you saying that that last sentence is correct?
Yes, correct.
And can you please read the last statement on that page?
This affidavit is done without any duress or pressure and is done subsequent to the meetings held with Mr. Gavin Watson as detailed.
Can you comment on that?
Chair, I didn't sign the agreement that day when it was drafted, due to the fact that that Mr. Frans Forster brought Carlos Bonifacio to the house of Mr. Angelo Agrizzi on the same day.
I'm sorry, brought what or who?
Mr. Frans Forster brought one of the employees, Mr. Carlos Bonifacio, to the house of Mr. Agrizzi on that same day. So all the attention was off me and all the attention was on Mr. Bonifacio. Mr. Agrizzi also wanted Mr. Bonifacio to do a similar statement. So at that point in time, I didn't finalize the statement, and it was later forwarded to me, the statement by Mr. Agrizzi. And I only signed it later on after other threats which were made.
Just going back to what you referred to as threats from Mr. Agrizzi. Had it not been for your fear of losing your job, would you have regarded it as the right thing to expose these illegal activities that Mr. Agrizzi was asking you to make a statement to expose?
Yes, Chair. That's why I'm here today as well.
Yeah. So say for fear of losing your job, what he was asking you to do was something that you would have been happy to do.
Chair, yes, it was a big concern because I knew that by exposing Mr. Watson that we would then lose the audit, we would lose a big portion of our income, we would lose a lot of things. So that was a big concern.
Yes, no, I accept that. So I just want to confirm that, except for that, what he was asking you, except for your
Yes.
fear that the company where you were employed would lose business from BOSASA, except for that, there was nothing wrong with what he was asking you to do.
Correct.
Actually, there was nothing wrong with what he was asking you to do. The only problem is that you feared that you could lose the company in which you were employed would
That's
lose
correct.
business. Yeah.
Correct.
And that might result in you losing your employment with that company.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. And what did you make of his offer to you, Mr. Agrizzi, to say, if you lose your employment, I'll pay you the amount that you referred to earlier per month?
I accepted at the time.
You accepted that it was a genuine offer?
Yes.
Yes. And did he indicate how long he would continue paying you a monthly salary of that amount?
Chair, he also explained to me on a few occasions, and that will come out a little bit later, that that the three gentlemen, and we might be running it a little bit ahead here now, that the three gentlemen that walked away from the company, being Mr. Andries van Tonder, Mr. Leon van Tonder, and Frans Forster, Mr. Agrizzi, a week or two later, from the meeting at his house, wanted to negotiate an exit package on their behalf. And they wanted to take over the DCS contract, the Department of Correctional Services contract. And that's how he explained how he would sustaining and paying the salary.
Yes. So your understanding was that it would be for how long?
for as long, Chair, I mean,
those details were not, you didn't apply
we
your
weren't
mind to
disclosed,
them.
but
Yeah.
it would carry on for a long time.
But you felt comfortable with that offer?
Yeah, when he mentioned that, because that was a big concern,
Yes.
and he put my mind at ease by explaining it to me like that,
Yes.
I'm prepared to pay your salary.
But then, based on exactly what you have just said now, I would imagine that as you started preparing the statement, you were not doing so because you were being compelled to, or you feared anything. It was because you were comfortable to do it because it was the right thing to do, and your fear that you might be without a job was taken care of.
Chair, no, just arriving at his house, seeing all the files, seeing all the documentation, that was enough to scare me. I mean, then it's, I mean, it's an emotional roller coaster. I mean, you need to consume so many things at that point in time that you don't know what to do, actually. Then you see all of this and you hear all of that, that's explained to you.
Okay, maybe I didn't formulate that correctly, because from your evidence, it wasn't just losing your job that you were concerned about. You were also concerned that if you did not make the statement, Mr. Agrizzi's threat to expose you would materialize.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct, yes.
But he was asking you to do what you regarded as right, to expose illegalities, and as long as the issue of your job was taken care of, then you didn't have to worry about him exposing you, because you were going into this very freely and voluntarily after he made this offer to you. Is that not right?
Chair, yes. At the time, I was still not comfortable, although he explained all of that, because it's a big decision at the time. I didn't expect that to happen when I arrived at the house. So it was, but you're right, you know, be concerned, who's going to pay your salary, yeah, he explained to you, come clean, you know, reveal all of this. So many things that go through your head, but I was very, how can I explain it? The fact that I didn't sign that agreement that day, I was very relieved when I left and I haven't signed it at that point in time, yes.
So, you know, I'm trying to understand your evidence, because if what he was asking you to do was something that you regarded as wrong, then I can understand if your attitude was, even if he offered you payment so that you didn't have to worry about your job for doing what he was asking you to do, you would still be concerned because you are being asked to do something that you regarded as wrong. Okay?
Yes.
But if what he was asking you to do was something that you regarded as right, and I understand you to have considered that that is the case, you regarded exposing these illegal activities as the right thing to do, but you were just concerned about your job. Once he took care of your job by making an offer to you, which you have told me you are comfortable with, I can't see why you continued to be concerned for doing something right, that was right.
Chair, no, you
Was not going to expose you.
yes,
For
you're
doing
right.
for doing what he was asking you to do, and you regarded what he was asking you to do as the right thing.
No, you're right, Chair. Things that went through my mind is that that our firm would lose the audit, and I was thinking about so many things, but you're right. But you're right. It's an emotional
Okay,
thing.
thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You have just confirmed that, in fact, before moving to that, can you just read into the record what appears at the very bottom of page AA922, just above the number 1?
Corrupt dealings involving the South African Revenue Services and other matters.
Do you have any comment on that?
Chair, well, that was again also included later on when Mr. Agrizzi must have finalized the statement, because I've just testified so up until now. I don't know of any corrupt dealings involving the South African Revenue Services.
Yes, okay.
That's fine. Chair, it is now 12:58. I don't know if I should proceed or whether this would be a convenient time to take the long adjournment.
Well, we can take the long adjournment if you are going to move on to something else.
The next topic that will be covered is the nature of documents that were provided by Mr. Venter.
Okay, let's take the lunch adjournment, and we will resume at 2 o'clock. We adjourn. Okay, no, that's fine. Mr.